Welcome. It is August 5th, and we are here to talk about the importance of reciprocal mentorship and leading across generations. My name is Sandra Garcia, and I am playing a dual role today, as I have been during this series with the New York Urban League and C-Suite Coach. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Lab Program Manager for NYUL, but I also serve as a C-Suite Coach. And this has been the fourth conversation we've had this year, rich conversation, all focused around coaching and how we can all develop our coaching or take advantage of coaching to develop our leadership muscles. So I'm excited for today's conversation, which I will actually be a part of, but will be moderated by Angelina Derisaw, who is the CEO of C-Suite Coach. So I'm going to hand it over to Angelina to share a little bit more about C-Suite Coach and what we're doing, and then to open up the conversation, and then we'll jump right into it.
Thank you so much, Sandy, and thanks everyone for joining. Really excited about this conversation because the theme of trust across generations has been coming up a lot with many of our clients. So we have the great opportunity to hear from Drinal Foster, who is a senior vice president in wealth and investment management technology and is responsible for driving global forward learning employee engagement and employee experience strategies for building high-performance workforces anchored in inclusion and belonging. And Drinal is a 30-year Wells Fargo veteran, starting in financial services at the front lines as a teller. And throughout her career, she's led various business functions and across the globe. So she's bringing to us 20 years of advanced leadership experience in the fields of human resources, DE&I, and treasury management. She's also very active in the community and sits on the boards of different organizations, including being a founding board member of Twin Cities Black Affinity Network Development Day. So thank you so much, Drinal, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
And we also have with us Sandra Garcia, who is a dear friend and partner and works with us as a C-Suite coach. She is a marketing and branding strategist as well as a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. Her corporate experience includes organizations such as Clear Channel, Time Warner Cable, People.com, and CNNmoney.com. And she's done great work developing marketing strategies and compelling sales programs. She has transitioned into the world of entrepreneurship as well as coaching, and for the last several years has been working with C-Suite Coach on both our learning and development programs as well as small business initiatives. So thank you so much for giving us a coach's take today, Sandra.
Absolutely.
All right, so I want to dive in again, as I mentioned, as we are working with different clients, the theme that has come up a lot has been these multiple generations. We are in a 5-generation workplace right now, which is more than we've ever had. And that creates a lot of room for opportunity, for growth, but it can also create some tensions and some frictions, as we know each of our generations has really different values. So I wanted to open up the conversation today because one of the things that happens often when we talk about reciprocal mentoring or thinking about how to build trust across these generations is, first, what is a mentor and when does mentorship come into play in one's career versus coaching? So Sandy, if you could just open up the conversation and give us a little insight there.
Yes, thank you. And what a great way to start, because these lines can be so blurred. And many mentors can also serve as coaches and vice versa. And I want to start by first saying that you can have people in your life that can serve as coaches. We are most familiar with athletic coaches. The Olympics are happening right now. But for us, in our leadership spaces, and I say we're all leaders of a certain space, also need coaches for our leadership muscles as well, just like athletes require coaches to help them build their athletic ability and muscles. Now, I'll start with a mentor, but just to finish up that thought, there are people who spend hours in becoming certified coaching, and it is also a skill set. That just like you have physicians that have credentials, you have coaches that also get credentials, and there are various levels also to being credentialed as a coach. So that's first. Now, in terms of what is a mentor is someone who can guide you. And if we're focused on your career journey, someone who can guide you, your overall career and personal development journey. The focus is usually sharing some kind of wisdom and experience and insights. Whereas a coach, from a focus perspective, usually is helping you in specific areas and usually focused areas. In addition, I would say a mentor relationship can be more supportive and advisory, whereas a coach relationship can be more action-oriented and solution-focused. So that is how I would distinguish the difference. I would also say that they are different, and we should look into having the multiple relationships. You can have multiple mentors. You can have mentorship relationships with people who don't even know that you're a mentee or view them as a mentee. But in addition to that, from an action-oriented, solution-based perspective, also looking into coaching to uncover what are areas which we might need to develop, and also just have a different tool in our tool chest to become better leaders.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Sandy. Really appreciate that. And Drinal, was also really excited to hear from you, because when I first met you and chatted with you, something that really stood out to me was the fact that you have had a really long career with one company, which isn't something that is very common these days, right? And as you look back over that time, can you talk to us a little bit about your experiences in mentorship? And for best practices, how do you think both mentors and mentees contribute to adding value into a mentoring relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just always love to share that I have this fun fact that I've been here at Wells Fargo since I was a teenager. So just imagine, being one of those young people that was the first of everything in their family. I came into corporate America not having any role models. And so it's funny that Sandy talked about folks that mentor you and they don't even know that you're mentoring, that they're mentoring you. And so I laugh when I hear that comment, because there are so many people that when I left the teller line and moved upstairs to human resources, literally upstairs, everyone was mentoring me. I didn't know, how to show, what are the things that I need to know from a business standpoint, in terms of just the office etiquette, what is the attire? How are the conversations, happening, with the folks that were in this almost like a C-suite office when I was out in Seattle. And so I always think back to those early beginnings. And I always think back to, what am I doing in terms of ensuring that the next wave of, employees that are coming into the organization, I spent a lot of time with early talent, have that same type of experience, whether it be informal or formal mentoring relationship. It makes a difference. It creates tremendous value, not just for the organization, but for us as individuals. So when we start thinking about a sense of belonging and do I feel included, do I feel seen? These are all the building blocks to ensuring that happens. So again, understand the role of being a mentee, but also understand, as a leader, with a formal title, without a title, that it's also my give back. And so I always think about, who else am I mentoring? Who am I opening the door for, creating opportunities? And so not just with our early talent that's coming into the organization, but even folks that have been here for a while that maybe stuck in their position in their career and looking for some additional guidance, some additional support. How do we do that and really work across the lines? And it's not at all about power dynamics. It's really about just education, knowledge, helping to navigate. You can imagine with an organization this size, how large it is to navigate. And so if you're one of those folks that you're looking for career mobility, how do I do that successfully? How do I navigate across these 80 plus different lines of businesses that we have in this large, massive organization? And, a lot of times we need a help. And so how are we helping to support each other, stand each other up, lift each other up? And then, building a better organization. I think about productivity. I think about innovation that can happen at an organization. I think about just kind of the experience from a customer standpoint, from an employee engagement standpoint. Think about the culture. If you have a culture of mentorship, again, folks that are being menteed, folks that are doing the mentoring, but also it doesn't always have to be one directional. I think about early talent folks that are also mentoring the folks that have been here a long time, right? A lot of different knowledge sharing that happens. Folks are coming from other organizations into our organization, so they're already coming with a wealth of knowledge and insights. And so how are we being able to tap into that and really unleash some of the talent that folks have already? And so those are just a couple of things that come to mind, but there's so much power in mentorship in general. And I hope that everyone here has someone informally that is mentoring you, or formally that is mentoring you as well. And you're never too old for mentorship is what I would also say.
Yes, I love that point, and I'm really glad that you brought up the theme of junior talent being able to mentor up. What are some of the ways you've seen junior talent or those that are in the mentee role provide value back to those that they're mentoring, either more seasoned leaders? How are they providing value back?
Absolutely. Let's use the example of technology right now. We're in a digital age. Think about the 5 generations that you mentioned in the workplace. A lot of folks are not as technically inclined. Think about our early talent being digital natives. And there's things that we just don't know if you've been around for 30 years or what have you, or folks that may not have children at home that can teach them about some of the digital capabilities. And so I think about that as an example, and just the knowledge, the insights that young folks are bringing into organizations that can help educate folks that have been here for a long time. So think about what you're doing. You're building trust. I think the trust piece is so critical. We're doing some myth busting. A lot of times folks come in with these preconceived notions around the various generations, and only when you start working across difference do you get a ability or even have a better appreciation for what each generation brings into the workplace. And you think about these unlikely relationships, friendships that are created as well. And one of the things that I love at my organization is that we spend so much time with our early talent, ensuring that folks have these connections. I know it's called reciprocal mentorship. I think of it as reverse mentorship. But again, it's this two-way dialogue, this relationship that is being facilitated. And just that difference, working across difference, the networking opportunities, the skill development, and again, more of the cultural exchange. So there's a lot that comes out of that particular learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Angelina, yeah, if I could just add to that question, I think about back in the day. I'm a little older than I look. When you would learn a new shortcut to doing something, either on Excel or PowerPoint. Now there's just a diverse set of tools that you can use to do different things. So yes, you have younger generations that are digital natives and bringing that digital savvy into the workforce. And not just that, but they also know how to effectively and efficiently use all these tools which we may definitely gravitate to. We might definitely be open to using, but it might take us longer to learn all the shortcuts, which they've just mastered and figured out. So I also think about shortcuts to being able to leverage digital tools. And then also, because they're digital natives, they also in their heads that have this inventory, being able to compare what works more effectively than not, which social media tool is better than the other. So just like I say, in relationship building and networking is easier to call or to text someone to ask a question. Having these reciprocal mentorship relationships, wouldn't it be beautiful to just like, hey, I have a question about this, and have someone be able to show you a shortcut than to have to go the long way of probably, figuring out by watching a YouTube and then an hour later getting it.
Definitely, there's so much value that different generations can provide, and I'm excited when I think about the cross-generational workplace. Something else that excites me, Drinal, is just hearing that feedback that your organization is looking at the skills and the talents that younger generations have to provide, and already beginning to implement some of that knowledge sharing. That certainly wasn't the case when I was coming up in corporate. It was very hierarchical, and senior vice presidents knew things. No one else in the organization, if you didn't sit on the executive floor, you didn't know anything. So I'm really excited to see that begin to shift and change. In fact, C-Suite Coach began working with one organization in 2022 that had a formalized reciprocal mentoring program where junior leaders and senior leaders mentored each other. And we leveraged coaching as a part of that program to really work with the leaders to identify how they could add value. And that brings me to a question for you, Sandra, which is, what role can coaches play? If I am a mentor and I want to add value to a relationship, how can I work with a coach to identify how to do that? If I'm a mentee and I want to learn more about how to add value, how can I do that with the help of a coach?
Yeah. First of all, we all have something to offer. We all bring something to the table. Angelina, I love one of the organizations that I get to work with through C-Suite Coach. We begin by reminding young people and young talented people, young, talented, diverse individuals that you've earned the right to be here. So everyone brings something to the table. And I think there is a process of exploration and self-discovery that goes into figuring out, what are your strengths? And what are things that you may be really good at that you may not even be aware of because it's so natural and organic to you? So a coach can help you in that self-exploration, but also in strength finding and discovery. There are actual tools out there. There is a strength finder tool that a coach can also help you with in order to figure out what they are, and also how to best show up in the strength in the workplace. And the same thing for someone who is more experienced in the workplace. What are other ways in which a strength can show up? So I would say help in identifying these areas, and also figuring out ways to show up in these strengths.
Thank you so much for that. Wholeheartedly agree with that point. And Janelle, in your career, have you had opportunities for formalized mentorship program? I heard earlier that you had a lot of mentors who didn't know they were mentoring you. How did you gain their trust? How did you build that relationship? And then in formalized programs, how did you get the opportunity to participate in those?
Yeah, no, great questions. And again, it's been such a long time, to your point, one organization. The wonderful thing is that I've had the ability to move throughout Wells Fargo. So I've probably been in 9, 10 different divisions here, which I'm incredibly grateful for. But it also goes back to being able to network across all of these different groups. Again, we're such a large organization. I've relocated with the organization 2 times. This is probably the longest location that I've been at here in Minneapolis. But I just think about how to make these genuine and authentic connections with folks that I want to get to know, and having kind of an idea around where I want to go and who are the people that can probably help me get there. And a lot of that had to do with, making friends in unlikely places and having these, starts of these mentorships. Some of it was developed informally. I think about all the opportunities that we have at our organizations to do volunteering events. And when you're at a volunteering event, you're meeting someone new, like, oh, you're in such and such area. I would love to connect with you and have coffee. Look and see kind of where that coffee meeting goes. And oftentimes it could be into a relationship, into a formal mentorship, if you will. One of the other things is that a lot of times there's several different types of mentoring programs that you probably have experienced throughout your career, or you will experience throughout your career. One of the best ones I always think about is being in a group mentoring program of early HR talented individuals, professionals, and we had a senior executive that was a mentor to us for like a 9 to 10 month period of time, and just how valuable that was at that stage in my career. And so incredibly valuable. And it goes back to being clear around kind of what the needs are. What am I working on from a development standpoint? What can my manager do to help me get to the places that I want to get to? And so those were a lot of the focused conversations that I was having, being very intentional around my development. I recently just completed a group mentoring with some technology folks. And so this was I was the senior leader this time, and having 3 mixed generation folks on this mentoring group, and we're in a pod. But, I think about the value that they brought to those meetings when we would meet each month, the relationships that were developed, that were formed, the knowledge that was shared, because everyone was in different parts of the business, the wisdom, the cultural experience. There's so much that comes out of that. And again, just incredibly grateful to have had some of these meaningful connections, these opportunities. And I also think back to, who am I mentoring now? I think right now my mentoring list, and I have a list of how many I could do effectively just to be intentional and help people with where they're trying to go. I'm currently mentoring like 4 people right now. But again, what can I do to still make some connections, help make introductions for other folks that are looking for mentorship? But yeah, those are a couple examples, things I think about. But I think it goes back to, being intentional with your development plan, number one, creating opportunities to network, to be intentional and to show up into different places where you have that opportunity to, again, volunteer. I think about all the project work, who's willing to tackle this, low-hanging fruit assignment, and, maybe raising your hand, getting visibility. That created, opportunities for me to mentor with even senior leaders at a higher level. And so it's just been some of these unique places where you wouldn't expect to find these mentoring opportunities that may show up if there's no formal mentoring program, at that organization. But those are a couple of things that come to mind. And we have several here within our organization that we obviously ensure that our employees are aware of, can tap into. And, I would say that there's never a shortage of mentors, which is amazing as well. Like people that are willing to reach back, to open a door for someone to spend that time, if it's 30 minutes a month, an hour a month, whatever that may be, but to help individuals, with their career navigation, where they're trying to go, but also having a clear direction on where you want to be.
Yes. One thing you said that I just want to underscore is the idea of building relationships throughout the organization. And I'm sure that's one of the things that kept you having movement in the career that you've had at Wells Fargo, and another way to find mentors. The other piece that really stood out to me is you've made space for 4 mentees. What did those mentees do to earn those spots? Because I'm sure that's a competitive spot to get. to get to be your mentee. So what do those mentees do to earn that spot? And anything else you've seen young people in your organization do that really has added great value or raised awareness about who they are and made people want to invest in them?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'll give you a little context just so you can understand. I'm one of the Black employee resource leaders here at Wells Fargo. I lead a very large territory. It's our ERN, Employee Resource Network. Some may call it business resource groups. And I facilitate a monthly call around career mobility. And I interview Black executives. And, I've gotten a number of messages. Thank you so much for hosting. That was a great discussion. I took away these things. And, you love getting those notes, but also included in that note, are you open to, a mentoring relationship? Can I connect with you, maybe in the next 30 days? And oftentimes those connection points turn into, an informal checkpoint, along that continuum. But again, you get these opportunities where people are just so inspired, they're encouraged. And it's, you're talking about things that are deeply personal to them. Again, that focus around career navigation, personal development more than anything, skill building. And so for me, when I think about the folks that have reached out, it was really around, number one, just having that opportunity to really dive in deeply, me personally, and not having my schedule, be an impediment to that relationship being, a very solid relationship, a very positive relationship. But also someone that took the time to do the homework, to do the research, to know kind of my story, what was it about me that, they appreciate? Maybe there was a skill set that I have that they're looking to refine or to better develop. And so just having clarity around what exactly they're wanting to do and why me, because again, I could introduce them to a number of other folks, but at the same time, such a benefit and such a privilege when folks do reach out, right? And it's not a hard no, but how else might we get creative? But I am very sensitive about, taking on more because I'm respectful about that connection, that relationship, that experience with that individual. But when I think about the people I've said yes to, just doing the homework and knowing exactly where they want to go in their career journey. And if I was able to help be a part of that or jump on the journey with them, I'm all for it. And so those are just a couple things that come to mind. But, I also think about, availability, what's realistic? Are you talking about a year-long mentoring relationship? Maybe I can do 6 months, but, what's that compromise at the same time? But I also think just having that courage to reach out and being very transparent and sharing with others kind of what your goals are. I think the more that we talk about our goals, the more people, you'd be surprised, the more people that want to help you with those goals and setting those goals, achieving those goals.
So I'm hearing have the courage to ask first and foremost. Do that research, why that person that you want to mentor you, why that mentor, what will they help you achieve, and have a timeline so that there's a clear end date so they know that this isn't going to go on forever. That's really, really helpful to think about when approaching mentors. And Sandra, for you, I want to talk a little bit more about the role of the mentor, especially when they are the senior leader. One thing that can happen as you get more seasoned in your career is you become used to knowing everything and being the one that knows everything. But there really is a need to remain coachable. How do you work with senior leaders, if they're leading teams, if they're mentoring others, to make sure that they are being coachable and gaining value versus feeling that they're the only ones that have value to give?
Strong question. Absolutely. This sounds so simple, but active listening, creating space to really hear folks out, and listen, not to respond, but to actually understand is something that we can all practice. So I would say active listening is something that especially more senior leaders can practice in order to create space to explore, to learn. And then also, this may not always be the case, but in terms of younger talent, they may not communicate in the way that you're used to, in a concise, effective, efficient manner. So also being able to hear for what isn't being said, I think is also a skill that we can work on. I would also say, in that same spirit, being patient, and just open, because with also ages and stages, the more senior you are, the busier life gets, the more impatient I would also say that we get. So being patient to be able to allow time to just do its thing. Sometimes we might just schedule time on the calendar and all we may have is really 30 to 45 minutes and we're looking to rush through a conversation, but really creating that space of patience to allow the conversation to evolve. I would also say one thing, Angelina, I know that you say often as well, is that feedback is a gift. The more senior we get, the less feedback we get. So also being open and inviting to really receiving true feedback. And feedback that may not be so perfect, but really creating space for vulnerable relationships where lines of communication are also safe so that your mentee can also be brave enough to share things that are not so beautiful and perfect.
That's really helpful and definitely something that we all have to challenge ourselves as leaders to be thinking about. How can we remain coachable? How can we continue to grow, right? Because essentially that is what being coachable is the dedication to continuing your learning journey. And so, Drinal, I want to ask you then, as a senior leader, how have you remained coachable and how does that have an impact on your career when you look back?
Yeah. You just have me thinking about just some of the relationships. I want to go back and piggyback on something that was mentioned. When we think about starting some of these relationships, how do we kind of disarm our folks that are having relationships with us, that we're having relationships with. And I always think about, what do those initial conversations look like, sound like? What are we doing to really get to know each other? And I just think there's so much value, not just on the leader, but also as the mentee as well, that we spend time understanding origin stories. Where are we coming from? How are we entering the space? What lens are we looking through? And so I always think about like the diversity dimensions wheel or get to know me slide, a 30, 90-second get to know me slide where folks can really understand where there's some shared commonalities and maybe some things that may be different, but being able to build upon those things. And so as a leader, that requires I think requires us to be vulnerable and to be transparent and truly to be open to enter into this relationship fully. And so those are some things that come to mind. But as I think about, myself and getting feedback, I'm an open book. And to the point that was made earlier, feedback is such a gift. I don't care if it comes from the top down, bottom up, from a partner that I work with, but I'm always doing kind of that check-in because I want to make sure that I'm serving folks that I work with the best way possible, that I'm showing up well, that I'm being of service to someone else. And again, honoring kind of this relationship that we said yes to. And so those are a couple of things that you will often see me do is, just do that check-in. How's it working out? I may not be the best mentor for this stage in your career where you are right now, and I'm okay with that. There's no hurt feelings, but even just kind of diffusing some of that and really ensuring that people feel comfortable with me, because I think when you have that relationship, that level of comfort, that there's an ability to really grow from there and grow together. And again, thinking about kind of that shared goal, that purpose, we're working at an organization. How do I help you? But also, how do you help me? A lot of times when we are in senior leadership roles, we forget kind of what happens on the front line. And so you talked about me being on the front line. I never forget where I come from. And so it's also a way for me to just do a check-in, like what's happening on the ground level. What are some of the things that need to be bubbled up that, we haven't had an ear to receive? And I have a direct line to gather some of that feedback. I think about we were doing all the return to office work, and that was one of the roles that I have as an employee engagement leader, is getting creative and doing like on-site activations. And how do we do that? How do we leverage technology for our employees as we do that? I went to the early talent folks, but also the legacy folks that have been here a while, and kind of created this mashup of a project team, if you will, because I don't have all the right answers just because I've been here for a long time. I want to know what are the things that are going to be really impactful that reaches across all the lines. And a lot of the great ideas came from the folks that were newer in the org or came from another organization, people that were not legacy folks. And so those are some of the values, some of the benefits. They're easy to activate, people that are eager to have some of these additional at-bats, some of these high profile opportunities, if you will, as they're continuing to grow their own career. So, they may not be getting that with their direct leadership team, but over here, I have some of these other opportunities that they may be interested in that are volunteer in nature. And so you just never know. I think there's a multitude of ways that we can tackle that.
Mm-hmm. Sandy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I actually, Drinal, it's so rich, but there was something else that I wanted to add to, because you were talking about how you show up and showing up for yourself and these conversations that you're hosting. So that took me back to last week. I actually did something for the New York Urban League around personal branding at a local high school. And part of showing up is really showing up, actually being present. So say someone you're interested in having as a mentor is doing something, show up. It's a great way to meet in person, especially nowadays when so many things are happening virtually. Actually show up. And second, when you do show up, sit in the front of the room so that you are noticed. So that way, once you send that follow-up conversation, Drinal and her peers remember who you were, and you can say, I was that person sitting in the front of the room that asked that question. In addition to that, I like to say that every interaction is an opportunity to show value. We're constantly interviewing, and people are picking up on things about us that we're not directly saying. A young lady after that session sent me an email that landed in my inbox this morning, but she made such a great impression and strong impression. So that self-advocacy is so critical and so important in the pre-interview to having someone decide, are you someone that I want to spend time on? Because from a mentorship perspective, that's really what it is. And time is so valuable today. And especially as we're talking about multi or different generations, where yes, life stages also impact the amount of time that you also have free and available in order to give to other things and other people. So those were just some things that came up. And then also persistence and consistency. So a personal story that also came to mind for me as I was thinking about my mentorship relationships is that they can take on different forms as well. So I remember during my corporate days in the media space, having someone that I called a mentor. I'm still not sure if he knows that. But on a quarterly basis, I would send an update email because maybe we didn't have time to meet. Maybe we didn't have time to connect. But a tactic was to just share a quarterly update of what I've been up to, what I was doing. And if I had a question, this is something I'm challenged with. How would you deal with it? Those are just some things I wanted to make sure I didn't forget, Angelina.
Yes, that's really powerful. And as I'm thinking about who I might want to be my mentor in my next stage of growth, these are great pointers for me to add to my toolkit for ways to show up well. So thank you for that. One other thing that came to mind as I listened to you both is something else we don't think about, or at least didn't mention, is beyond the digital transformation. When we look at the different generations in the workplace, there's also a lot of value added in the different values that those generations have, how they bring them into the workplace. So we did some research on the 5 generations a few weeks back, and something that came up was millennials valuing diversity more, millennials valuing flexibility more, and Gen Z really thinking about sustainability and how that's a huge value, how climate is a huge value of them. They want to have a world to live in, and how that may also shape things that senior leaders need to be thinking about when it comes to those mentorship relationships. So I did want to call that out. And then Janelle, I want to come back to you and ask a question here around measuring effectiveness. So when you think to your own relationships, call it with the 4 people you're mentoring now, people you've had in the past, how do you measure success? And then bringing that to an organizational level, if an organization is to engage in mentorship programs, how can they gauge what success can look like?
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways to measure success. One thing I think about, if it's more of that formal mentorship, obviously the surveys that we do, how valuable was that relationship? Are you stronger as a mentor, stronger as a mentee? Was there skill development, upskilling that happened? I also think about just general participation rates. How is the employee engagement? How is that changing, shifting? Are you seeing kind of new signs of, just stronger connections, partnerships in your organizations? I think about success stories. I think we all are storytellers, but we need to be able to tell the stories of a powerful connection, a big win that happened as a result of a mentoring opportunity. I think about kind of a skill assessment too, as a mentor, how were you before the relationship started? How are you after? Same thing for a mentee. How are you as a mentee? How are you after? So constantly figuring out ways to measure the success of these programs. I also think about just kind of that continuous feedback loop and continuous evaluation of programs as well, to ensure that we're hitting on all the right things. What are things that are missing? What are some of the things that came up in verbatims or any anecdote feedback through some of these mentoring programs, but also recognizing that some of this, again, could be very informal as well. So there may not be the tools, systems that may be set up, but I think even, doing a couple of those things, if you do have the opportunity to formalize mentorship programs, that you look at some of those. A couple other things I wanted to hit on. This goes back to kind of this new environment that we're in. I talked about return to office. And, for some organizations, they may have a rule, it's 2 days, 3 days, maybe some folks have to come 5 days. But for the folks that have the opportunity to come in a couple of days a week, I would say be intentional. If you have leaders that are coming on site at your events or on site to your campus, to your office location, be intentional, be visible. Don't miss those opportunities to sit in a front row, to have that great question that you're able to ask one of those leaders, or to, again, have the courage to go up and introduce yourself. Have your 60-second elevator pitch ready already. You started talking a little bit about personal branding, even, Sandy. I was thinking about personal brands and, what are you known for and how do you incorporate that into that introduction when you have these opportunities to make some of these connections? I'm a believer that we are always one handshake away from our next opportunity. And so a lot of times we have to go and create the opportunity. We can't sit and wait for someone to come and tap us on the shoulder to say, hey, you're up next. But, not using kind of that traditional mindset, but to actually be intentional and kind of putting yourself in the game, so to speak. But Angelina, those are just a couple of things I think about just in terms of effectiveness. Mentorship programs are never going to get old. They're going to continue to evolve. They will continue to impact, the culture of organizations. And then again, you got to think about, the folks that are mentees today. You're going to be a mentor to someone if you're not a mentor to someone already. I think about everyone always mentoring someone. If that's a brand new employee that's 1 week on the job, you have that opportunity to show up as a buddy, as a mentor to help someone else in their journey while you too are being mentored by someone else. And again, it's just kind of that give back opportunity and something I think that feels good. And, thinking about how can we support each other, especially those of us, people of color, we need to be very intentional in creating some of those pathways for that to happen.
Yeah, Angelina, can I just add to the measurement piece? So from the coach consultant perspective, some ways that I have observed that mentorship can be measured. And first, I want to just build off of something that Drinal shared in terms of surveys. Please participate in the surveys. And sometimes they're so annoying. We get them in our inbox, the reminders come in, but they're being sent for a reason because feedback is a gift. We are looking for the feedback. Your organizations are looking for that feedback in order to see what may be working, what is not working. And your thoughts, perspectives, your insights are also important in order to better these formal mentorship programs. In addition, ways that I have seen other organizations measure is through participation. How many leaders within the organization are also as excited to participate in these programs in the same way that sometimes we see the excitement and eagerness from our younger folks. In addition to that, I've also seen the measurement take place from a promotions perspective. How are you promoting people from within? Are those who are participating in these mentorship programs growing within the organization? And then there are organizations that introduce these tools as a retention and as a stay tactic. So if you do partner people up with a mentor, for example, in order to hopefully keep them within your organization, do they actually stay?
And then to that, just recognition, any kind of rewards.
Awards, recognition,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Internally, externally.
It doesn't always have to be monetary, although that helps. But, I think there's other ways that you can do some marketing promotion. And a lot of it too is spreading the word. I'm surprised by how many people said they didn't know what we had or that program existed, or just the lack of awareness a lot of times. But agree with everything you shared, Sandy.
Yes, thank you both for calling out ways we can measure effectiveness, because we know that is something that companies are always looking for, is we have to figure out the ROI. And I will pause. We're just about at time, but if anyone in the room had questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute. We have time for about two or three questions if anyone has any. And as you're thinking of your question, I'll just share this, that what both of you shared about mentorship from a senior level, from a junior level, ways in which we could be working on building the skill sets to do that effectively, it applies if you have mentees or you don't, right? That persistence you need in your career, that work on self-awareness, that work on seeing the value you have to provide. I heard you talk about the elevator pitch, Drinal. sitting in the front of the room. These are things that, whether or not you have a mentor, are still valuable pieces to be adding to how you want to look at rolling out your career. And so, do we have any questions in the chat or otherwise? I'll just give you a
Yeah,
second.
Angelina, I do want to add to one of the earlier questions around how to leverage cross-generational relationships. A few things, if you do have a cross-generational mentorship relationship, things that you can explore and start exploring today can be communication. Or if you are a mentor to someone and you have a coach and you're trying to figure out what should my next conversation be about, you can bring up communication coaching. So how can you help someone's interpersonal skills, for example, to better communicate across generations, because we do know there are differences there. And possibly even having a conversation with a coach about how to be a better mentor coaching. So building on effective mentorship. What can that look like for you? And then also conflict resolution coaching. So helping to better navigate differences and then also finding that common ground. So these are just some things that can be further explored with a coach as it pertains to cross-generational relationships and mentorship.
That was good. And the conflict resolution piece really stood out to me because there might be times as a mentee or as a mentor where you may disappoint or fall short, and the relationship doesn't have to end, but there does have to be effective steps towards resolution. So that's an important skill to work on as well. I just want to take a second to see, before we close out and get final words, do we have any questions at all?
I had a question. How do you guys disrupt kind of the anxiety and fear that might come from building trust in that mentor-mentee relationship? Maybe there's fear of disappointment or there's anxiety around performance. And how do you work toward building that trust?
I can go ahead and start. And this goes back to, one of my earlier comments around, ensuring that we spend time up front around kind of what you want out of the relationship. What do I want? How do we hold the mirror up for each other and say, hey, I see you kind of going off on the guardrail here. Let's get you back on track. And so having that ability to be open and to be honest in those discussions. And also just to, my greatest fear is, that I'm going to disappoint you, being comfortable enough, having that courage to say those things, if that's something that you were having some anxiety about. But again, let's do that both ways. And so you figure out these creative ways to do these icebreakers. And hopefully those icebreakers are the things that will, again, continue to build up that relationship and that connection that you have with that senior leader. But I know sometimes it could be a bit difficult, again, because you think about just kind of the hierarchy and who has the title, who doesn't have the title. But at the same time, thinking about what can you do to dismantle some of that. I just want to quickly share, and Sandy, jump in here too. I had a bad mentoring relationship once, and it was because my manager picked a mentor for me. It didn't serve me. And so even today, when I think about mentorship, I should ask my manager, possibly thoughts, ideas. And this would have been a younger version of Drinal too. But today, I want to be intentional. I want to drive that connection. And maybe it's going to be my manager helping to create some doors, open some doors for some of those opportunities. So I just want to throw that out there as well, because there was no trust. I wasn't comfortable in that mentoring relationship. And I'm talking about years ago, obviously. However, that's still something I think about.
Yeah, definitely, Drinal. Vulnerability. I would add to my response there, and I'll share a story from a senior executive at Microsoft. We won't mention a name, so we can mention Microsoft. But he shared this story that say at a team lunch or a team dinner, the two last seats to always be filled were the seats right next to him. And the reason for that was because people were either too afraid or didn't want to spend the lunch or the dinner sitting next to the super senior leader. And then the other seat would usually be filled up the quickest by the person who just wanted to, show off, and that wouldn't make an enjoyable lunch for him. And what he decided to do in order to open himself up and humanize himself some more was create a social media account so folks can see that he walks down the aisles at the grocery store just like you do. So I would say vulnerability is important, but also humanizing ourselves. So yes, there might be that fancy title, but although I have this title, I also do all the same things as you. I still feel fear. I still question or feel insecurity from time to time. So I think that humanization is so critical, especially for senior leaders. And the last thing, I know you're about to close, Angelina, is from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, we may feel more comfortable having a coaching, mentorship, sponsorship relationship with people who look like us. But in the spirit of also expanding our leadership muscles and building those leadership muscles, I think it's also important for us to get proximate with people who look different from us so we can also hear of and learn of different ways and approaches of tackling things as well.
And can I put an and on there? As you're doing all those things, and it's also okay to have multiple mentors at one time. You're going to have someone that is going to take care of you. If I'm a business owner, I need to make sure I got my accountant. I need to make sure I got my lawyer. I got to make sure I have these different people. So think of your personal board of directors and creating a board of directors that are those mentors that are going to keep you honest.
Well, you all both ended with all of the things that we needed to hear and gave us a charge to move forward on building that trust. I'm taking away how to be more vulnerable and thinking about that as I think about my mentee relationships. And as we are in this cross-generational and increasingly diverse, multicultural world, there's a lot of areas in which we have to stretch ourselves. For anyone who is on the mentee side, I just want to reinforce for you that you have a lot to offer. And anyone on the mentor side, I want to reinforce that we can always be learning and growing. And so it is important to recognize that the junior folks in our lives can add a lot of value for us. Drinal and Sandra, I want to thank you both so much for your contributions. Thank you all for being here. And until our next C-Suite Coach Chat, we will see you all. Thank you so much.